presented by Bounding into Comics.
Hello and welcome aboard Skytalker. I'm joined by Stephen Kent, cable news extraordinaire and Star Wars appreciator.
Cider, that's my first time seeing that intro. That was insane.
Yeah,
Well
you're
done.
welcome.
Well
Yeah.
done.
Jedi Master Kent.
Oh my gosh, that was pretty hype. You definitely made a montage of Disney Star Wars shows pretty lit.
Right?
Well done. Well done. But where were all the other Star Wars movies? That was like all TV series. What was you
Yeah,
thinking?
well, we were talking about Sabine tonight, so I was trying to channel what new Disney
Oh,
Star Wars has presented to get everybody in the atmosphere of it. It can be
amazing.
tweaked over time.
So you're gonna make a new one every stream, huh?
Something like that. I hope to be able to compile it into a nice one so it gives us a nice atmosphere for everyone going forward, but it will
Well,
change.
I have a request that then the next one just has to be a montage of Anakin's signature behind the back lightsaber spin move.
Oh, sure. Yep, there's plenty of those. There's
Just
plenty of
over
those.
and over and over again on a
The
reel.
whole theme. Yep. Sure. You got it.
Oh, nice, nice. All right, well here we are. This is Skytalker. This is now real, a new. I guess we'll be doing this stream every week, every other week with Bounding into Comics. Super excited. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, man.
How much Star Wars do they make you talk about on Bounding?
Well, when Mr. Trent was around, it was about every stream. So I
Okay.
I'm not very familiar with the lore itself. I've watched the movies and some of the television series. As I mentioned in private, I am very enamored with the Mandalorian lifestyle before the extended universe was decanonized. Um, but
Okay.
not much has changed. But I'm not really a big Star Wars guy though. But believe me, if you can explain it, I can wrap my head around it. Don't worry.
Hell yes. Cool. Yeah, I was just going to respond to Leslie in the chat. Is this going to be a weekly Star Wars stream? That's the goal. That is the goal, to have this be weekly. I think it will probably end up being like 3 times a month total, but that's really just 1 week off, right? So we will be aiming to do this every week. Right now, I'm in the chat as Geeky Stoics. That's actually my other channel where I do philosophy of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. So kind of like philosophy and religion and Joseph Campbell deep dives and stuff like that. So if y'all see Geeky Stoics in the chat, that's me. So yeah, this has been sort of the inaugural week of contributing over at Bounding into Comics. I've just been writing a ton already, but the most fun I've had so far has been doing a review of this Ben Shapiro and Critical Drinker ranking of Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I'm a little bit of a political junkie. That is my other fandom besides Star Wars. So I've been having a little bit of fun with this one because I watch Critical Drinkers reviews almost every time they post. I enjoy them, salty as he may be. But I always feel like I learned something watching Critical. So this was actually funny because watching Critical Drinker try to keep up with Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
I think Ben Shapiro, not only just because he just runs his mouth so fast, he also just was like running away with lore and name dropping and deep cuts from the Star Wars EU. I think Critical Drinker was like, oh, what do I do?
From the same guy that was burning Barbies about 4 months ago. It's trippy watching Ben Shapiro just like hopscotch through pop culture.
Yeah, I don't know when he has like the time to even watch this stuff, but I don't know. I guess when you're on your own boss, you have time. Maybe. One likes to believe. All right. Cool. All right. Well, so I want to talk about Critical Drinker and Ben Shapiro's rankings. Is it possible to play a little bit of the video
Sure.
of them talking about it, and we'll just react to maybe the kickoff, the first minute, and then do a little response.
Oop, hold on just a second here. There we are. Just want to make sure we've got everything, dotted and i'd. So, is there a particular timestamp, or you just want to go through it?
Just skip into the 30-second mark and see where they start off with Empire Strikes Back, because it has to be Empire. It's always number one.
Oops.
Thanks for joining me.
Cheers, sir.
So we're both Star Wars fans. I assume that you're a fan mostly of the original trilogy.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Can I just say, you and I have way better backgrounds than these guys to be talking about Star Wars. Like sitting down for tea and crumpets, not what I think
Yeah.
for Star Wars.
Where are they? Country club? Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe like a room in the Queen's mansion in London. This was
it's true that's quite a sprawling field in the back there that they're sitting. It's got a balcony too, so wherever they are, it's got a view.
could be Naboo.
How much all we got left at this point?
Yeah. So why don't we just start from the rankings of the Star Wars movies, and then we
Sure.
can just start ripping into Kathleen Kennedy and talk about how she's destroyed the entire universe and how they've wrecked.
I'm stunned.
Right? Of course, he comes out just wham, knocking it out of the park with that.
Is
Yeah.
Star Wars fans in 2023, and I mean this with like love in my heart for all of us, but it's always, yeah, let's talk about Star Wars and then how it's horrible.
Mhm.
Wrecked some of the great
That's
IP ever
all in one
ever
sentence.
created and all of that. Okay, so what's your number one?
It's going to have to be Empire.
Of course, Empire. Okay, so everyone agrees.
Sorry,
Empire.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, I don't know. Is Empire your number one? Is that just classic as can be?
Well, personally, I came into it a little later, so the Revenge of the Sith is mine because it goes so far over the top with Anakin's tale, like further than the original
Ah.
trilogy did. Like
See-
it gives me that extra like, ow, my heart, you know?
I love hearing this because I don't know. This will get ahead of the plan, but Revenge of the Sith is my second favorite movie. It is probably the one that is closest to my heart as a Star Wars fan because I'm 33. I was 15 when that movie hit theaters, so that was like my first Star Wars experience apart from my parents, where I went out with my best friends and saw Revenge of the Sith midnight showing. Got out of school early. We had we had Jedi robes, really DIY, like crappy stuff that we had basically made in a spare room, and then just like the early FX lightsabers. And so went and did that movie. It was just a very personal experience, and where most of Star Wars, I think, for people starts with watching it with their dad or their brothers on a couch or in the movie theaters, 77, 80, 83. For me, it's not until 2005 when it was really personal. So Revenge of the Sith always lands as my number two.
All right, that's
I
fair.
respect that. I respect that. But yeah, let's just play on here real quick up until they get to rank 3, and then let's go off script and just talk about the rest of it.
Sure.
It's predictable, but
No, you're right. I mean, there's only one right answer to that particular question. Okay, so what's your number two?
A New Hope.
Okay, I'll agree with that as well. So
It's easy
okay,
so
and
far.
it's going to diverge somewhere in here. Okay, number three.
Then it's going to be Return of the Jedi.
Okay, so here I have sort of an internal battle. I love Return of the Jedi. The second half of Revenge of the Sith is great. The first half is a little bit of a mess. And I do have a peculiar liking for Rogue One. I think
And
that
there it is.
Rogue One is a good piece of content. So
Is this where you wanted to stop or a little further?
Yeah, we'll stop there, and you can just scroll on down to where we've got Ben Shapiro's rankings listed out. So Rogue
Is this it?
One, as I hear this a lot from a lot of like OG fans who feel, they kind of like struggled with the prequels a little bit. They had to get over some of the elements of the prequels, but then, the sequels were just outright offensive to them. Rogue One always breaks through that, at least in a lot of the conversations I have with my Star Wars friends in real life and not on the internet. Rogue One, I don't know, it looks like a Star Wars movie. I think it's, in my opinion, it is what kids watching the original trilogy, they imagined the seriousness and the stakes of the Empire versus the Rebellion. They sort of imagined it in this very, very serious light that the original trilogy doesn't even manage to live up to. But Rogue One is like, again, Saving Private Ryan, but Star Wars. It's very dark. And so then when you get to be 40 years old and you're watching Rogue One, you go, this is what I always thought Star Wars was. So that makes sense to me.
It's grown up.
Yeah.
The Dungeon Master Blaster here, and he says, mine are the original 3, then I don't bother ranking any others.
Hardcore. Yeah.
Well,
I get
and
that.
Rogue One came in as a pre-Dunkirk. It Dunkirked 1 year before Dunkirk came out and did it. It almost beat for beat follows Dunkirk, and I love that part.
Rogue One?
Yeah. So you have
Mm.
they have the beach scene with the walkers, and then they're on the run. So you basically have the same situation in Dunkirk. In Dunkirk, then you have the away team trying to retrieve these people going on, and in Dunkirk you have the civilians on their way in the boat, and you have the team that's trying to pull these guys out, arriving into a huge battlefield, wreckage everywhere. Same thing that happened when the civilian ship showed up to pull people out of Dunkirk. Wreckage everywhere, just horrible mayhem and carnage. So it's very
I believe you.
bizarre, like parallels with those two things, man. So
They were coming out around the same time. I always remember Rogue One in the context of the 2016 election,
yeah,
because at the time I hosted the Beltway Banthas podcast, so that was my big project. I was super invested in this podcast, and it was about the politics of Star Wars because I work and live in the Washington D.C. area, and so the whole shtick was interviewing politicians, people in the media, and like journalists, political journalists about their love of Star Wars. And Rogue One is coming out, and you finally get, in the midst of the 2016 election, you get this rift in the rebellion between Mon Mothma, Saw Gerrera, and you get exposed to a little bit of a more radical rebellion, a more unlikable rebellion. And for Democrats and liberals that I would talk to for the podcast, they were like, "This is Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders v. Hillary Clinton." And honestly, I get that. Like, it is sort of the view of, are we just against against the empire, or are we trying to build something and maintain the idea of the republic? And Hillary Clinton, neoliberal establishmentarian, she's not ever going to break or change the system, at least not in a way that Bernie Sanders would like. He wants to just like burn it all down. He's just against all of it. And Saw Gerrera kind of represented that. But that was just a viewpoint that we heard a lot on the Beltway Banthas podcast. I miss doing that show. That was fun.
and I'm just highlighting the comments in the chat that are echoing the notion about Rogue One here, because quite obviously, as you can see, Rogue One hit those points as you were talking about for a lot of Star Wars fans in and out of the new and old trilogies. Both can agree that Rogue One does it pretty well.
Yeah, and one of your commenters, well, I guess they're our commenters now. Hey, it's me in HD says, the Phantom Menace was a great moment to have lived through. I don't remember. I guess like I would have been 10 when that movie came out, and I hate that I don't remember. But I know I went and I saw it in theaters, but it's like that special factor. I know that my dad took me, but he was chaperoning. He didn't care. He wasn't invested in it, so it wasn't like a thing that we were doing together.
Right.
I was just being accompanied, and therefore I just don't have an emotional memory attached to it. Most of my early Star Wars memories are toys. I had my Luke Return of the Jedi toy, and then that weird long-nosed spy dude from A New Hope, from Mos Eisley. I can't remember his name, and I'm going to get shamed in the
Max
comments section.
Reboot? Rebo?
No, it was so it was the spy with goggles, long nose, black cloak. Somebody can probably help me out in the comments, who was following Luke, Han, and Chewbacca to the Millennium Falcon and then reported them to the Empire. But I had my Luke toy and I had that guy. And all of my earliest memories, like when I was 6, 7, 8, were playing with the toys and just like doing battles and stuff and coming up with my own canon.
Yeah.
No, for sure. It's really interesting to think about Star Wars beginning point for some people as the merchandise, because there were fans who, for the merchandise was the death of it all. The merchandising was the raping and pillaging of Star Wars. And then there's the generation that was their hook. They actually got the toys, and then they wanted to know the story behind the toys. And I kind of feel like I'm one of those people, actually, as a
Yep.
1989 kid with parents who didn't indoctrinate me into Star Wars properly.
So, hey, it's me in HD. He echoes you, and he says here, I can't. Oh man, the merchandise, the marketing, the excitement is burned into my mind. Apparently for Phantom Menace, and that's a fandom, Phantom,
The Pepsi
Phantom.
cans. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Gotta have it.
I remember those in particular, But like you, I went and saw the movie. My chaperone was into it, and so things were a little different. But like you, I don't recall the experience. I recall the event, but not the experience. So
Yeah.
maybe it was just one of those things, right? You know.
Yes. And no, in the comments, thank you. It was Garindin. Garindin was the long-nosed, weird spy following them around in A New Hope. And I do want to shout out to DZ3. No, not DZ3. Sorry. I do love you, DZ3. But Leslie Tarkin about Tarkin v. Krennic. So Rogue One, my favorite aspect of it is the villain. I actually have one cosplay that I've built. I've submitted to the 501st, and I plan to be a Krennic for the 501st Costuming Club. So, played by Ben Mendelsohn, kind of just disjointed, kind of Australian accent in a world of English accent Imperial officers. The rift between those two guys is my favorite thing in the Empire. It's like a weird micro class struggle that goes on within the Empire because you've got the officers within the Imperial program coming from the core worlds, Coruscant, and they are upper class, hoity-toity. They have these fine, clean little accents. But Krennic is space trash. He comes from he comes from the mid-rim, and he had to go through the officers program, climb his way up by merit and struggle rather than just, being born into the right family like Tarkin did. And Tarkin hates him. He looks down on him. And uh, Krennic is just trying to burn down everybody in his path. And he's scrappy. I love that guy. There's a book in the canon by James Luceno, who James Luceno is my favorite Star Wars writer. James Luceno did Rogue One Catalyst, which is the prequel to the prequel. It's the prequel to Rogue One. And it is the story of Galen Erso and Krennic before they're falling out and the early development of the Death Star program. And in that book, you get Krennic basically enslaving the Geonosians for the project, then genociding them and, participating in the wiping out of the Geonosians. But you also get the power politics between Tarkin and Krennic. Super cool. And yes, Krennic is a little bit of a hillbilly. And Ben Mendelsohn would talk about this in the interviews leading up to Rogue One, that he specifically chose to cling on to his Australian accent so that he did sound like backwater English, which I think was a perfect choice. And I love an underdog. So
They don't
Krennic.
call them hillbillies down there, though. They call them bogans. So he's a space bogan.
Yes. Oh, we spent a lot of time on Rogue One, but no, Rogue
All
One.
right.
It's a good third pick. If you're into, I don't know, like breaking away from the trilogies a little bit. So for me, so Ben Shapiro, him and Critical, I think mostly start aligning out to this a bit. Return of the Jedi, number 4. They both love Revenge of the Sith. The second half, believe that it flows well. And then after that, Attack of the Clones. So I just weirdly, like, Critical Drinker didn't have that much negative to say about Attack of the Clones. This is one of my least favorite Star Wars movies ever, actually.
It seems a bit like what we need something to fill a hole. It seems a bit like a filler episode of a movie. Honestly, that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's the criticism I always will lob at Attack of the Clones is just it's long. It's very long. I get bored every time I watch it. But then my daughter loved it for some reason. And it might be that because it's like mid 2000s special effects boom. It's just shiny. There's just objects to look at everywhere. It's over animated. And so my daughter at a very early age, I'm, getting her into all the Star Wars movies. She's becoming a fan, and she just wants to watch episode 2 over and over and over again. And I accept it. If she wants to watch the movie about how he doesn't like sand, I'm into it.
Well, and that one had the R2 that was screaming a lot, right? R2 was very very vocal, if you will. pardon the term. It's very vocal in that one, right?
Yes, a lot of screaming R2.
Yeah, that's a good one for kids. Kids tend to like a screaming trash can for some reason.
No, it's a fun movie. I probably showed my kid Revenge of the Sith at way too early of an age.
That's why.
I was like, this is history. Like, you need to watch Order 66.
There's George Washington,
Feel-
and then there's the
feel her
battle on
eyes open.
Mustafar. Yeah, like
Look
a
at it.
Clockwork Orange, you know, with a little. Yeah, don't worry. The Mustafar fight's coming up. It makes up for everything.
It's making you stronger. Just watch. This is why we have to defend the Republic. Yeah. No, for sure. No, Chirrut Imwe, definitely from Rogue One. A little discussion going on about him in chat. Chirrut Imwe was great. He's actually a good segue for what we're going to talk about here after rankings, which is force sensitivity and who gets to be a Jedi and who doesn't. But Chirrut Imwe is like a Jedi, well, Guardian of the Wills, like a Jedi acolyte, studier and admirer of the Jedi and the Force. I mean, couldn't be cooler. I love that guy. His death was very sad. Actually, one of the next videos I want to do for Bounding into Comics is a ranking of the saddest Star Wars
There you
moments.
go.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
top 5, top
yeah.
10 saddest moments in
The
Star
top 5 most devastating Star Wars moments, and it will be hard to
Well,
pick.
you've seen it. You've seen the meme top 10 anime betrayals of all time, right? You've seen that meme. So there you go. You've got like your top 10 listicles all set, just of all time at the end of it, just of all time. It doesn't matter if it is or not, just at the
I have very Americanized anime preferences, and so for me, I'm just like, it's Majin Vegeta blowing away the audience at the tournament.
Right? Top 10
Yes.
anime betrayals of
Yes.
all time.
He's waited his whole life for this moment. But no, we'll go ahead and blow through these rankings. So, they go Attack of the Clones, Solo, The Phantom Menace, and then just, the bottom of the list for Critical and Ben Shapiro is the sequel trilogy, with both of them placing The Last Jedi there, The Force Awakens beneath it as being like the unforgivable sin that set off the entire trilogy, and The Rise of Skywalker. Interestingly enough, I mentioned down at the very bottom of the article, Ben Shapiro gave his rankings in 2019 after he exited the movie theater for The Rise of Skywalker. And I put it in the article because I remembered that he tweeted this after I had just seen the movie, and I loathe The Rise of Skywalker. It was my birthday when that movie came out, and I brought my my dad, his wife, my daughter, my wife, my best friend, and we all went to go see The Rise of Skywalker. And like my parents were like, yeah, let's go see this movie. It's the final Star Wars movie for Steven. And I just came out of that movie just like, don't look at me. Don't look at me. The shame, the bag of shame. I don't want to talk to anybody. But I remember that Ben Shapiro called that movie like nostalgia fueled joy or something. The quote is above there. And so he put The Rise of Skywalker like halfway through his rankings. Nostalgia joy fueled joy fest that made up for a lot of the sins of The Last Jedi. Yeah, there it is. Nostalgia packed joy. Yeah, I guess if Lando Calrissian like taking off his helmet and going, hey, it's me, Lando. Feel nostalgia rush? Yeah. I don't know.
Is Ben Shapiro the jangle keys in front of my face and I'll giggle kind of like consumer? Is that are we just learning that?
I mean, no, I don't think so. I don't listen to him that often, but him and the Daily Wire guys, Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles have some pretty good film debates. I know, like the Barbie movie tore Daily Wire asunder. Michael Knowles going to the mat for Barbie against Ben Shapiro was pretty funny, but no, I don't get the Rise of Skywalker thing, and I get how you could come out of that movie after seeing The Last Jedi and being bummed, pissed, whatever about that movie, and then you come back with The Rise of Skywalker, and I will admit, like, it is an attempt to right wrongs, but it's righting wrongs that messes it all up. It's like, you can't
Yeah.
waffle like that in the middle of a trilogy. You at the end of a trilogy. You can't waffle. You have to, like, commit to what you've done. And what I hate about that movie is how much it erases some of the moves that were made in The Last Jedi, and then drags Palpatine back from the dead,
Somehow.
which, yeah, talk about, like, disgracing characters' arcs. Bringing him back and, like, attaching him to, like, a meat hook and hanging him in this place called Exegol over the throne of the Sith, whatever that is. It was just very, very silly, and to me was, like, the epitome of how cowardly Disney has been on a lot of these Star Wars movies, and this is where I get a little fiery and contrarian about it, is, like, I don't mind if they shatter some norms, and transgress against fans in some ways, but they have to believe in it to believe in what they're doing, which is like the Last Jedi thing. It was like an attempt to tell a story about the Force, a perspective on Luke that was coming from someplace.
Somewhere.
And you have, like, yeah, it's like it was an opinion, and I respect that begrudgingly, even if it's wrong. But then the Rise of Skywalker is like, no, 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 don't look at that attempt that we made to be to have an interesting
Exactly.
thought. I hate that more. Like, I hate cowardly movie making more. Um, I don't know. That's kind
Well,
of where I get into it on those movies.
Marius brings up this good point, is that the problem with the Rise of Skywalker, rather, is that it took an idea that was from a vastly better book story, and a fleet of 10,000 ships with a super weapon each has vast logical issues that doesn't make sense based on its location. Yeah, and that,
Mhm.
you know, we found out later on that this movie was several cuts that they had shopped this around at different screenings, hacked it up depending on what the outcome was, the voting outcome was, and
Horrible.
also this was a multiple writing team effort. This wasn't just J.J. Abrams and his original writing team. There were 4 other writing teams that took a slap at this thing until it finally found its way into a national release. And even then, the international was edited again. And the biggest mistake that they make, see, I wrote fanfic for about 10 years. I
Mhm.
got into it. And the biggest mistake that like fan fiction writers get into is trying to answer questions in the lore. Don't do that. Don't answer questions. That's why metachlorians came and went. Lucas
Mm.
tried to answer how Jedis worked and why they were different from Han Solo and Leia. And so that that he had to drop it immediately because it made no sense that you had weird little bugs in your blood that let you move things with your mind. So again, like this is what fan fiction writers do though, is they see a hole and they try to fill it with their idea of it. And that's how you end up with all this crazy stuff like Rise of Skywalker that was, in my opinion, pure fan fiction. You could have found that on
Mm.
fanfiction.net or Archive of Our Own. Maybe a better version because at least Ray would have had her boobs out. So,
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not
right.
wrong. That was a good take. I appreciate that. I actually I can't find my written list for Star Wars rankings. I had it somewhere, but it's gone. So, uh, I know I think I can recount how it goes. So, Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Sith, then it is Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope, Rogue One, then it's going to be in 6, The Phantom Menace. I don't hate that movie. I'm a big Qui-Gon Jinn stan, so I'm here for Qui-Gon Jinn fighting to the death. Followed by Solo. Then you've got Attack of the Clones. No, I'm sorry, not Attack of the Clones. The Force Awakens. Then The Last Jedi. Then Attack of the Clones. And then The Rise of Skywalker. So I think it's that Last Jedi placement that sometimes gets me in trouble, uh, but it's all in good fun. Yeah, I just The Last Jedi is like aesthetically pleasing to me, but Attack of the Clones is just, uh there's just so much about like the animation, it's the CGI, it's the battle droids, it's Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman not having much to work with. The lightsaber battle isn't even any good in the end. Uh, there's just so little about episode 2 that works for me besides Geonosis and the arena battle.
Well, again, like I said, it feels like a filler episode. Like they needed something to give Anakin a pathway to becoming Vader in the third movie. But they couldn't pull the trigger on that and let that, because everybody knew it was going to happen though. But for some reason, George wasn't like, I don't want to let him know yet. I'm going to surprise him in the third movie. I don't know why he chose to do that, but that's what number 2 felt like.
Yeah.
Was like, maybe he's going to be Vader, maybe he's not going to be Vader. He is obviously, but maybe.
Who's to say? Who's to say? Yeah, it's a snooze fest. It's a snooze fest, okay? Yeah, I'll admit it. It's boring. It's a boring movie. Did have good political scenes. I do love political scenes. I'm
Star
trying-
Wars C-SPAN.
Yeah, that's so Star Wars C-SPAN, the show that I want that they are too afraid to make, cowards, is a prequel Senate show that takes place, recast Natalie Portman, bring back in Jimmy Schmidt, Bail Organa, and just give us the Clone Wars, but on Coruscant. Will it be rife with probably some woke BS from Natalie Portman? Probably so. Will it still be exactly what I've been waiting for my whole life? Yeah, probably so.
Well, I mean, you could theme it after West Wing, so you have like the Chancellor playing keep away with the senators that have to communicate with him
Yeah.
about the war and their resupply efforts. So
You got to use Ian McDiarmid while we have him.
right,
You know, like
right.
as long, and this is my rule about so many of the Star Wars legacy cast is you got to use them while you got them, and you know it will always break my heart, you know, that Carrie Fisher didn't have time for a reunion with the rest of the original cast. Not like they were gonna give it to them. You know, they had a chance, and they blew it with the Force Awakens and not getting Han, Luke, and Leia all back together again. And you don't get redos on some of that stuff. So yeah, use your cast while you got them. Ian McDiarmid is still a warm body.
Yeah.
Gotta cast him for a C-SPAN Star Wars show because there are 5 of us who will watch it.
Right.
And that might be all Disney Plus needs to
Right.
justify
These days.
making stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. An audience of a few is all you need. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
He was out of place.
Christopher Christopher Lee was an actor that was vastly out of his league with Star Wars. He
Mhm.
is like up there with Tennant with the Shakespearean acting, but also with Patrick Stewart with the Shakespearean acting. So
Mhm.
intermingled with these very American shoot from the hip style actors, directors, cinematographers, he is very out of place. I will admit he's quite Dracula on a scene of Barney, you know?
This is something of a theme in Star Wars with Sir Alec Guinness and Ian McDiarmid is not a knight, but you know he also again classical theater actor, possibly too good for Star Wars, right? Like that's kind of the snobby idea about it. Sir Alec Guinness certainly had that opinion about being in the original Star Wars. He thought it was ridiculous.
He didn't
And
understand it.
yeah, he didn't understand it. He thought it was silly. And was stunned to see it take off the way that it did. And Christopher Lee also, you know, probably too good for this. Like, you know, like Lord of the Rings was like perfect for that guy. But he brought such incredible gravitas to the role. And when you consider that Count Dooku is a noble, and you know, is lord of the planet Sereno, that he was, you know, a wealthy, you know, he was supposed to be a regent of this planet, and he walked away from it. I don't know, actually walked away, recruited into the Jedi life. And then he went back to it. So he left the Jedi Order and went back to Sereno to rule over it. So yeah, he's a noble. So who better to play it than Christopher Lee, a guy who's probably too hoity-toity for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know about his history until a little bit after he passed away, and it was astonishing to me to read his performance history, let alone his war history. So,
What
and then to find out he was in Star Wars and got his head cut off, like wow, what a way to do a guy like that, huh? Just cut his head off.
and he didn't even get to say any last words, reveal the big plot of the bad guy. Just sat there and took it.
Mm. That's
Mm-mm.
loyalty, though. I guess Dooku was loyal right up until the very, very end.
I don't think he had time to process what was going on.
It's
I think
true.
he really thought that Palpatine was going to intervene on his behalf and save him. I think when Palpatine says do it, I think he's making eye contact with Dooku. You might have to check me on that, but the way that he looks at Palpatine for like an intervention,
Mm.
and then Palpatine looks at him and just goes, "Do it." I don't know.
I
Save
think
me.
you're right. That sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. He's desperate. And then he says, do it. Do it. And nailed it
Yeah.
right off.
Well, I know Star Wars isn't your primary beat, but do you have any sort of hot takes about your rankings on Star Wars before we get into Force lore?
Not really. I honestly wouldn't put Solo on the list at all. That feels entirely disconnected from Star Wars. It
Mm.
barely connects into it visually, in my opinion. Um, so
It
it could
breaks
have
in the
been an
same way that Rogue One kind of breaks. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does so more egregiously because it's isolated. It's not a story that's tied
Mhm.
into what we know about Star Wars anyway. We don't. Nobody needed to know that Han Solo's name came from he didn't have a last name and he was by
Solo,
himself.
you're all alone.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's like cool. Thanks, guys. We appreciate that. Nice. So,
Yeah, so I guess we talk about Solo and then we'll pivot over to
well, I do
the
have one
Force.
thing to say though, right? That about that, okay? You remember in that movie,
Do
the
it.
woman gave him the gold dice and he hung it
Yeah.
from the Millennium
Mhm.
Falcon's rearview mirror, I guess. And
Yeah.
the the thing is that here comes Luke in the Force projection on the
Mhm.
planet with the red salt.
Yeah. Great.
He hands Leia the golden dice.
From
And it
some
was like,
floozy.
well, it's like, here, here, sis, he never forgot her. You know, he's
No.
like, he's dead, but he never forgot her, you know?
No,
Like,
this is a fine point. What were they thinking? Yeah.
exactly. It was so evil. That's why
Exactly.
Solo is so painful to me. Because even Ryan Johnson was like, I refuse to recognize that. I'm gonna take the dice, but I
After
refuse to recognize that.
when I die, I want my wife to by my at my funeral, by my graveside, be holding a gift from my high school girlfriend.
Right?
So, he loved this so much.
Right.
I don't know who she was, but I'll always think of him when I have it. No, I agree. That's actually a wonderful point. I
That's it. Yeah.
I am with Hansby and HD. So I like Solo, but the thing about Solo, it's like well acted. Alden should not have been able to pull it off, but somehow he did. Somehow he actually did kind of pull
Yeah.
off Han Solo, and obviously I think there's been a lot of agreement about Donald Glover as Lando. Like it worked, um,
He has a
but
swag.
but the thing is that nobody asked for this story. This is not a story anybody wanted. Harrison Ford is alive. You don't you don't recast characters like Han Solo and do their prequel movie when they are still with us and when people are still in love with the guy himself. It was very, very silly. And for that to come off of the heels of The Last Jedi, it was never going to work. It was never going to work. Um, you know, but it's one of those movies that I watch and I go, all right, there's freaking Woody Harrelson in this movie for some reason.
Right.
The movie doesn't quite look like Star Wars is supposed to look, but I don't hate it. It just What purpose did it serve?
I tell people if they went and put Fallout Solo, if they put Fallout,
Mm.
like the Fallout video game, and then colon Solo on it, you wouldn't know it was a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
It just beat for beat feels like a Fallout Solo story, and it's just one of those things. It feels more American than it should. Star Wars had American bravado, yes, but it was more mythical, a little bit closer to Zelda than to Mario, if you will.
Dun, 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 dun. Zelda, the Zelda Ocarina of Time soundtrack was
Mhm.
my Spotify Wrapped #1 this year.
Wow.
You know how there's I don't know, I've seen a couple memes about how kids screw up parents' Spotify Wrapped. At least that's in my circles. And Zelda Ocarina of Time ended up as my #1 album with like my top 5 songs because that's our board game music. Every time we'll play board games, particularly like Ticket to Ride and this other game.
Sure.
What's it called? Yeah, whatever. I forgot it. Um, yeah, we always just play the Zelda soundtrack. And now it's all I think about.
It's good family music.
It is adventure, adventure. What is this from DZ3? And then we're gonna move on to the Force. And again, I might say, "Oh, what about Vader?" Now Vader was a little bit different. I want to know how he was a good man who turned evil. What was the reason for it? Bad dreams, anxiety,
Yeah.
being a control freak. So actually, uh, I do a little bit of public speaking as part of my day job adventures, and I gave this talk at a conference last year about being a control freak and like and politics, right? Like the politics of like who in our culture are the people trying to control every aspect of your life, and it's the people who just can't let shit go. Anakin is like exhibit A. He has a bad dream. I know he thinks it's going to happen, but they never happen the way that the dark side in his dreams tells him it's going to happen. And yeah, you can't let your anxiety get to you. Got to be a little stoic, y'all.
But again, like the saddest part about Anakin is that really had, and I don't want to be like mean to Obi-Wan or any other characters, but just as a 20, looking at it through 2020 vision,
Mm,
um, really had they just reached out and hugged that kid, you know, just
mm,
just let him know that, hey, you're the prophecy kid, but any minute you want to take a breather, have some cat cotton candy, pet a cat, that's cool too. You can be a child. They just didn't. And I know that that was intentional by Lucas because nothing happens on film by accident. But so that's just for me, that's the hardest thing about Anakin is at any point to prevent Vader, had you just hugged that kid, it woun't have happened. None of it would have happened.
Now, I think that is well put. I appreciate that. So, again, I think it's when you're talking about Star Wars and decisions that characters make and what happens with characters, you can have the behind the scenes, what was George Lucas trying to tell us conversation, or you can have the what should the characters have done in your,
Mhm.
your headcanon kind of deal. And I agree, like he needed someone to be there for him, but the Jedi they just couldn't do it. And I think that they knew. I think that they knew what Anakin was into, especially Obi-Wan. Had a keen understanding of what was going on with Padme, but was not his father, and he wasn't a master. He was a brother, and he didn't want to confront him like that. He didn't want to have that kind of relationship and that kind of tension, and he just failed.
Yep.
It does suck. He did need a hug,
Yep.
somebody to be
That's
there
all it
for
would
him.
have taken.
Mm-mm-mm. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about the Jedi journey. So, uh, this is an ongoing debate within Star Wars. Who gets to be a Jedi? Who does not? I'm going to be writing it for my column this week for Bounding into Comics. I don't. It might be up tomorrow. Kind of depends if I finish ironing out my thoughts about this. But Dave Filoni has kind of re-upped a little bit of the inner fandom turmoil over the Sabine story and what was going on with Sabine's force sensitivity and her Jedi training in the Ahsoka show. Um, I guess you can scroll down to his quote on this and we can talk a little bit about it. But for starters, did you watch the Ahsoka show?
No, no, I don't have Disney Plus.
Okay. Yeah, I don't I don't right now actually. Maybe next year I will I'll re-up it. But um for folks who did and did not watch the Ahsoka show, Sabine Wren, Mandalorian, she, does saber combat, dark saber combat, especially like in the Star Wars Rebels show, animated series. She is a warrior. There were, wink winks, nod nods that, she's powerful, has talent and all kinds of stuff. But then we come back into the Ahsoka show, and she is Ahsoka's failed apprentice. They have a falling out because Ahsoka didn't really feel like she could handle all of this. That she has an explosive temper, of course, because ladies in Star Wars these days, always angry, always explosive. Ray number one, but again, Ahsoka is the opposite of that. And she was basically just a lousy Jedi student. And then the crescendo of the show is she finally connects with the Force. She like fails throughout the entire show. She can't saber fight. She can't win battles. She can't use Force push. She tries to use it against Shakti, Shinhati, excuse me, Shinhati in a duel and fails. And then in the very end of the show, she uses it to force jump and force throw, to throw Ezra Bridger across a far chasm. I felt, in terms of Star Wars characters with a poor connection to the Force, trying to be a Jedi, what else should have been done here? This seems like exactly like what fans were complaining about with Rey. Mary Sue did nothing. She woke up from a long nap, a light switch goes off, and she is super powered in the Force, crushing Kylo Ren, doing everything that a Jedi could do after years and years of training. She's smacking Luke over the head with a stick in The Last Jedi and knocking him to the ground, lifting all these crazy rocks, going over the top. And Sabine struggles for an entire show to move a cup. In fact, she never even does manage to move a cup, but she has one triumph in the end. And then there was like tension again, like, oh wow, like, so anybody can do this? Yeah, anybody can do this. This is a meritocracy universe, just like the real world. Anybody who puts effort into a thing, even if you naturally suck at it and don't have a propensity for it, that you can do it. It might be harder for you. What do you think, Cider?
So the Force to me has always been this special spiritual endowment. It has been sort of like not in the same sense as finding the Dalai Lama by laying out items that belong to the previous Dalai Lama,
Mm-hmm.
but in that same
Carrying his
vein.
photo in your shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in that same vein of having like a spiritual sort of like Dragon Ball Z, for instance, like the aura of a Force user. Being a Saiyan is different than being a Namekian. So
Mm-hmm.
this is what my thinking was: is rather than being genetic, it was a spiritual thing, and you began with a spark that became a wildfire. If
Mm-hmm.
you practiced, if you did your meditation, if you resisted what is considered sin for a Jedi, it would grow into a wildfire that you could then harness and protect people with. And
Yeah.
that's why I understood it to be. And that's what made it unique to have guys like Han Solo and Leia and Lando and all these other characters that had very niche talent, skills, and abilities versus the Jedi who were, albeit OP by comparison, but these guys still had a place to be in there. Now that we have this meritocracy, why would you want to be a smuggler? Why wouldn't you want to have a little forced trickery ability? Why wouldn't we learn how to do the whole? This isn't the taxation you're looking to apply to me. Why wouldn't you?
Okay. Yeah.
You know.
No, and this
So
is so I think I was having this conversation with my best bud back home, because we grew up kind of like Star Wars was like the basis of our friendship. I'm about to do 501st costuming. I love Jedi and Sith as my primary part of my fandom. Like
mhm.
I like the lightsaber wars and the Force wars. But he loves the bounty hunter stuff. He loves the seedy underworld of Star Wars. And there are different types of Star Wars fans. There are Star Wars fans who primarily enjoy the gunslinger stuff. Those people are
The military stuff.
yeah, exactly. And like when I hang out with Mandalorian mercs and costumers, like they're just like a type of person. They're like the steampunk people at Comic Cons. They're a type. They don't want to be a Jedi. They're not mystics. They're not spiritualists. They're not interested in robes. And maybe they're contrarians. Like they think that like, oh, everybody wants to be a Jedi. Therefore, I want to be a bounty hunter. Those people exist. And so just because you could train in the Force doesn't mean you want to. That to me is the real truth, that the Force flows through every living person, flows through every living thing. Gosh, I think even inanimate things in the way that Yoda and George Lucas describe it, that it flows through everything and binds us all together. And then the midichlorians, of course, added a wrinkle, which is like the strength of the receptors in you. Like there's a chemical component, which to me, and I think Dave Filoni puts this as well. What does he say? Oh, like the gifted child, the equivalent of the gifted child, being force sensitive. So being force sensitive is when your kid takes the aptitude test or whatever in school and they just like crush it in math, and they are just unnaturally good in thinking in numbers, or they're really, really good in writing, and there's no explanation for it, which we all know this is a thing. And then they end up in those advanced tracks. They are force sensitive in this way. Look, progressives, like the people who want to burn down meritocracy in the world, in this country, in media, this is how they think. They think there should be no gifted children. There should be no meritocracy. There should be no advanced placement tracks. I wrote a little bit about this in my book. I'll plug it. How the Force Can Fix the World. Yes. I wrote.
You want to hold it up again?
I can't get the cover. I wrote about it a little bit in my book, about natural talent and how like the California school system, among a couple others, New York is also floating some of this stuff, are looking at getting rid of math placement scores and getting rid of SAT placements for state universities, because that's discriminatory, right? Like actually having to give people a test to be good at something is discriminatory somehow. And if somebody's really good at math, well, maybe that just means that they need to slow down and let everybody catch up. No, screw that. Like if you are naturally really good at something, go ahead, go to the special placement classes so that you can like keep going on your journey. Force sensitivity, I think of, is like that. They're just people who are unfairly born with certain talent. But you could also go on that journey, but who would want to? Like, because it's hard. Like being a martial artist, being an athlete. There are people who just by dint of their bone structure are going to be great basketball players. But that doesn't mean that I can't just work way harder. I kind of thought that's like a thing that most people on like the cultural right sort of believed in, and that's where I exist. But then those kind of same people tend to kind of hate this idea that the Force is democratized, that everybody can tap into it. And I've just noticed that. And that's not like, that's an overstatement and generalizing, but I kind of run into that a lot, because I think tradition and being rooted in the traditions of Star Wars means Skywalkers, bloodlines. The Force is strong with certain people and not with others. I don't know. I like the idea that anybody can do it, but it's going to be hard.
Sure. I mean, it has a very American kind of sound to it, because we again are the country that says it doesn't matter how you're born, you can determine your fate. At least we used to anyway. We tried to exude that still a little. But anyway, the reason why I prefer it to be like a spiritual thing where only so many people are able to access it is because it retains its uniqueness.
Mm.
In escapism, you want to have a vehicle for you being the special guy. And as Syndrome said in Incredibles, when everybody's super, nobody will be. And then when everybody's a Jedi, nobody will be. And that's kind of my issue, is that in escapism you want to feel special and unique. And as you said, the contrarian will see a bunch of Jedi cosplayers and say, well, I will be the Mandalorian, and thus I will feel special because I am not part of this group. I am part of my own. And this is my thinking on it, is that the diversity of
Yeah.
characters becomes very narrow if everyone's allowed to be the very special one.
Well, a great example of that, Star Wars Galaxies, the MMO from the 2010s. So this was Star Wars' answer to World of Warcraft. It predates the Star Wars Old Republic MMO, and this was again actually like part of my fandom. It was like the action figures, then it was the prequels, and then it was Star Wars Galaxies. I lived on this game from 2004 to like 2008. 4 years of my life going between Dantooine and Naboo and Tatooine and shit, and like building houses and stuff and getting into fights. But it was originally structured. Yes. Oh, Star Wars Galaxies is my happy place. Like I had a house near Moinia on Naboo, in the foothills of the mountains, just past a Gungan enclave, and a very short speeder ride from Emperor Palpatine's Naboo retreat, where you could go to the retreat and you could pay a visit to Emperor Palpatine and kneel before him at his throne. It was so cool. It was so cool. I spent so much time on this game, and the way that it was originally structured was that you had to pick a class. You had to pick a class in the beginning, and I don't remember all of it, but it was like, I don't know, crafter, specialist, a smuggler, military. So it was just those. And you didn't pick Jedi. Jedi, you had to earn through a long quest, very long. You had to play forever, and you had to go on all of these crazy adventures and side quests in Star Wars Galaxies. Again, it's an MMO, so you can do whatever you want. And you also, there was no rule book for how to be a Jedi. Okay. So you didn't have to, or there wasn't like a quest line where you like do this, do this, do this, and then you get to be a Jedi. You kind of had to share knowledge with the other players and learn where to go to find the right quests. And in this game of gunslingers and Imperials and bounty hunters and traitors, eventually every now and then you came across another character who was a Jedi and would bust out a lightsaber and kill everybody. It was so cool. You would go on a quest and go, grinding or whatever, with your group, and somebody would bust out a lightsaber, and you're like, oh shit,
Better run.
yeah,
Scatter.
and then they changed the game, and then they made Jedi a class in the beginning. So the game went through a big remodel, and Jedi was then a thing that you could pick. And it was horrible. It killed the game. It was the death of Star Wars Galaxies, among like another update or two that they made. But then you would go to Mos Eisley in the cantina. Instead of it being full of lowlifes and smugglers, it was full of Jedi in the middle of the Galactic Civil War era. And then you would go to Naboo, and you'd be riding around on your speeder, and then you'd be assaulted by a gang of Jedi.
Yep.
It was so stupid. It was
all of a
so
sudden a
stupid.
Burning Man rave breaks out in front of you and you get mugged. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and it killed the spirit of the game, where being a Jedi was like an impossible quest. What year was it? 2005, 2006. I think the update happened in 2007. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was in 2007, because I graduated high school in 2008, and that was around the time that I stopped playing. So in my head, it would have been around 2007. The glory days were 2005, 2006. But yeah, so that's kind of where my mind goes when I think about like everybody being a Jedi. That is kind of proof that if everybody can be a Jedi, about 75% of people will pick to be a Jedi because lightsabers and robes, and it's cool. But here in the real world, like again, I just think about talent.
Bruce
And
Lee.
not everybody can do this stuff. Being a Jedi is freaking hard. It's also not an appealing lifestyle. There's nothing appealing about being a Jedi. The things you have to give up, the things you abstain from, the pursuit of that kind of that stoic mentality around emotion and the way that you live your life. there's no reason you'd want to. So the idea that Sabine could train as a Jedi to try to kick open that closed door within her, I don't have a problem with that. And I love that she sucked at it. And I felt like the creatives over at Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni and the likes, I felt like they heard the fans on the Rey thing. This is my opinion. I feel like they heard the fans when we were like, Rey overpowered, Rey was ridiculous, and she didn't earn what she had. And all Sabine did was struggle. And the droid tells her she's like the worst, most untalented student that he's ever seen wield a lightsaber. So to me, that felt like them going, all right, we hear you. We're going to make Sabine horrible. But because she has a short purple haircut, it kind of sets people off. She represents and looks like and symbolizes something that people distrust, particularly legacy Star Wars fans.
Yep.
And I get that. That's fair. Yeah, it hits the button. And
for fans that enjoyed her as a Mandalorian in Rebels, though, her transitioning into a Jedi, and I'm not using that word to be goofy. It is a transition into a Jedi, but her transition into a Jedi is a tad bit abrupt, considering this was Ezra Bridger's journey throughout what we knew of him. And so all of a sudden, Sabine is sort of taking his prominence from him that he had earned and then sacrificed when he rode away on the space whales that fart hyperspace. So,
yeah, a bit.
that's
Ezra.
all. That's the way I read it. A lot of the fans sort of felt like Ezra kind of got cheated out of it, and then she gets all the special time with Ahsoka, who is, to a lot of people, the last remnant of good Anakin. So,
Episode 5 of Ahsoka. If you haven't watched the show and you're not going to watch it, I would say just watch episode 5. It's just Ahsoka and Anakin having their reunion and her kind of like final training in the world between worlds.
Ooh, well, I watched that whole thing. I watched that. Yes, that was very well done.
As an episode 3 fan, like, boy, that got me. That got me so hard. But I don't really get the idea that like Sabine stole anything from Ezra. He had a heroic act in blasting Thrawn off into deep space, sacrificing himself, doing what, and I'm gonna make this about gender, doing what a man is supposed to do for his friends, for his people, and being a hero. And he stopped being a whiny, bratty little boy and did the most heroic thing possible. And he's lost in space, and his friends have to go find him. So, like, what else was going to happen? They had to go find him, and had to be Sabine and Ahsoka. But I don't get why she had to train. I don't get why she had to narratively train as a Jedi. She could have just been a Mandalorian and been a better one, less of a hothead, less of a jerk, and less bratty. She could have just been that. I don't know why she had to be a Jedi pupil.
Right.
That's, I don't know. As a Star Wars fan, that's kind of one of those areas where I go, it's not my call. I'm just trying to like interpret the story, and hopefully I like it.
Well, and again, I mean, this is where we're at and headed into season 2. We have Ezra back. We see what he's become in his time away, or at least a brief view of it. So, onward and upward. But there's also that theory that they're migrating out of the proper Star Wars universe now with Ahsoka. So that could be what Ezra's role is to be the new like leader, ambassador guy, because he's the only one who's going to know how to navigate this new area that everybody else is new to.
Yeah, and Leslie makes a great point here, that Sabine sacrificed the galaxy to find Ezra. Ezra sacrificed himself to save the galaxy. They aren't the same. They definitely are not the same. Again, Ezra did a selfless and heroic, again, I'm going to say like manly act. And what Sabine did was like prototypical emotional females, just not thinking about that bigger picture and just thinking about this emotional connection, a want and a need. Men and women are very different. And she handles that situation differently. I also think it was the unvirtuous, wrong decision. She should have not let Balin and the witch Morgan Elsbeth into that galaxy? Absolutely not. But then you don't have a story. Then you don't have a show. So I don't know. Someone had to do it. Might as well be Sabine, because Sabine's bratty and rude, and she has a lot to learn. Like Ahsoka. Ahsoka used to suck. She used to be pretty awful. That might be a good place to wrap up. What do you think,
Sure.
Sider?
Yeah, I mean,
This is a good
full circle,
inaugural.
right?
This is a good inaugural Skytalker.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd say so. Full circle.
yeah. Everybody in the chat, thank you for hanging out. It's been really nice just kind of seeing everybody who's going to be engaging in these conversations. We're going to try to establish some regularity in the weeks ahead. We will figure out kind of what the schedule is going to be, let you know. Thursdays might be what we do, and it will be me, different guests. Hopefully Cider will come back and grace us with his presence, because he's a pro and makes all this stuff work. I am technologically inept, so I need someone like you. You're my Chewbacca. I need you.
Sure, man. I'm not gonna make the noise though. I'm not gonna make the noise.
Don't abandon me. Yeah, no, but we'll bring on a bunch of new faces. There's a roster of new people in the Bounding into Comics family, and we want to introduce you all to them. Matt Battaglia is one of our new guys. Awesome comic book artist. He also lives here in the DC. Well, he actually lives up in Philly, but he comes down to DC often, and so I see him. And we're gonna do maybe a joint stream. And get into the weeds on Star Wars. Fun thing, actually, Cider, for you to share with everybody. Let me see if I can find it, and I'll drop it in. So before Matt Battaglia and I were both part of Bounding into Comics, we did a show together where we talked about Star Wars. Here it is. I'm going to drop it in the chat. And we both sat on a panel and talked about Star Wars and disagreed on a bunch of stuff. And we're going to have to do that again for Skytalker now that we're both
Sure.
in. So I don't know. Did that link work? Is that link clickable that I put in the chat?
That would be up to them. I can't do that in StreamYard. They have to.
Cool.
That would be out in the chat. Looks like
Cool.
it is.
All right. Well, good. DZ3, Leslie. Hey, it's me in HD. Nice to meet you all. We'll be doing this again. This has been Skytalker. I'm Stephen Kent. You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Kent X. Throw me a follow. And then on YouTube, my other project is Geeky Stoics, and that's also part of geekystoics.com, my newsletter on philosophy, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Marvel. Hope you enjoy it. Cider, may the force be with you, sir.
And to you too. Have a good night, everyone. I'm going to play the intro as the outro in case you missed it.
Presented by Bounding into Comics.